Hello, Fremont family, and welcome to our Sermon Discussion podcast. We will be discussing the sermon titled Easy But Not Comfortable, guest preached by Dan Wilson, our former associate pastor, on Sunday, July 20th, 2025. We will be going over Mark 15, 16 through 32, as well as revisiting Mark chapter 8, verse 34. My name is Christine Perales. I am filling in for Holly Winkle. I serve in children's ministry, Loaves and Fishes, and the podcast team.
And I'm Jenny McHenry, and I'm a deacon, and I help out in summer children's ministry, and I'm a member of Fremont Music Academy.
All right. This passage of Mark is pretty heavy. So I'd like to call to mind first something that will kind of, to keep in the back of our minds while we go through this, is that Jesus' suffering is prophesied in the Psalms and Isaiah and other parts of the Old Testament. And that the beauty of remembering this is that it shows that all of it is under God's control and a part of his plan. These events are fulfillments of these Old Testament prophecies. So none of this is by accident. None of this is by chance. Like, all of this is intentional. All right, so we'll start with Jesus is mocked. And the first thing that's brought up is that it's a whole battalion of soldiers mocking him, which is about 600 soldiers.
Yeah.
And Jenny, you had brought up like how many people that is.
Right. Because that seems like more than, we generally see in a crowd here. So it's a lot of people.
And all of those 600 soldiers, they're taking part in the mocking of Jesus, right? There's irony throughout this passage. But they mock him by dressing him like a king, giving him his crown of thorns, saluting him. They fall to their knees. They give him a fake scepter. But it's 600 soldiers doing this.
Right. Which for me changes the image of them. It says they strike his head with a reed and spit on him and then mock him, kneeling down to him. And it's just... Oh, it's so intense to think about that, and he knows this is for them. He's enduring this to save them, and just the intensity of that.
Yes, it's like what happened with the religious leaders before he was brought to Pilate when they're, yelling at him, prophesy, prophesy, but it's magnified.
Right.
Exponentially. When I was reading this, I was thinking about how much hate and scorn does it take to inflict such pain on an innocent man? And not just by the Romans, but by the religious leaders too. And like you said, these were all people Jesus came to save. I think it speaks of the brokenness of the world and people today who still mock Jesus. Mm-hmm. And like we were discussing earlier, we mock amongst ourselves, other people.
Right, which I think that's the intense weight of it is when you start to see, it was actually if I could go forward to the Levites and just the people walking by, it says those who passed by derided him, which again, I looked up and it was the word blasphemio, which is pretty intense. It's not like, oh, you're so stupid. It's like, they're blaspheming. Of course, I don't know, because I'm not an expert in Greek, so I should tread carefully there. But I'm not even close. But But that they are all the people, that the crowds passing by, the soldiers and the priests and Levites who are mocking amongst themselves one to another, and then even at least one on the cross. It says those who were crucified with him, but reviled him. But we when you think about how, I don't know, that's all of us, right? That's all of us, that everybody fits into some sort of category, and we all are capable of deriding him or mocking him. And certainly when we, this is what struck me, that when we mock others, even if we're not meaning to mock them, but we're like, oh, did you see what so-and-so did? It's really, they're created in his image, and he created them to be with him as much as he created us to be with him. So we are just like these people. I think it just hit me really hard how much we are just like these people.
I thought about that too. And the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about that was comments online, right? Yeah. And that's not just among people, just the world in general, but also I've seen a lot of non-Jesus statements by Christians or people who say they're Christians online. Can be very mocking of others and not very Jesus-like,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, it's online, it's a lot easier to do, but it's still wrong. And it's still just shows it's not others, like it's everywhere.
Right. And I think there's that scripture, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me, or whatever you've not done.
Yeah, I things like that make me think of how does this make Jesus feel? Like seeing how we treat each other when we're supposed to love each other.
Right. Which is the most overwhelming, amazing part of this whole thing, is that he did all this, and that, as Dan Wilson pointed out, without the wine with myrrh in it to ease away the pain. I wrote it down. He offered himself completely in the midst of all of this, which is like a microcosm of what all of us in this world, have done and are capable of doing to save us. Like, he was right there in this like intensified version of it, and enduring all of that for the very purpose of saving us from that.
Yeah, I think another way Dan talked about it was he called it a conscious sacrifice, which I thought was really just a perfect way to phrase it. This, I thought about meekness. The meekness, people say the meekness of Jesus during all of this. And we think of it in our world today as like a sign of weakness or cowardliness. But actually, like, the definition of it is strength or power under control.
Yes.
And like, how much strength and power did it take Jesus? Like, did he have to just be silent? Like in Isaiah 53, like he didn't open his mouth.
Right.
The little lamb. It's just incredible. Speaking about the wine with the myrrh, I read up on that, and the narcotic for pain. But when I was looking it up, it made me think about back in Mark 14, verse 25, he says at the Last Supper, "I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it in the new kingdom of God."
Yeah.
And so I know it had the myrrh in it, but it's still, to me, it was kind of like a little foreshadowing of what was to come. Something I'd like to touch on before we move forward to the crucifixion, just because I think it's so important. It's easy to not remember the suffering of Jesus. Just in this, from the Garden of Gethsemane on, like he's, his pain, his anguish in Gethsemane when he's praying. He's been falsely accused. He was abandoned by his disciples, denied 3 times by Peter. He's been spit on and beaten by the religious leaders, the Roman soldiers. He's mocked by all of them, soon to be mocked by the crowd. He was rejected and substituted for a murderer and insurrectionist. His innocence was ignored and disregarded by Pilate and even Herod. In Luke, it talks about that. And they were the acting governmental authority. He was flogged and scourged. And I know those two kind of get talked about like they're the same. But if you look them up, being scourged is much more gruesome.
Yeah.
It's just meant to inflict maximum pain and damage to the body. Like, just so much. And then for the crucifixion itself, if you look up like what a person would go through if they were crucified, like just how horrible and what a cruel death that was. He suffers all of this willingly in the midst of these people mocking him.
Yeah.
And also, Jesus knew he had to suffer. He had to not only die, but suffer so greatly as a man and also as the Son of God. Because in doing that, in the suffering, that's what opens us up to be humbled and amazed at his sacrifice. It opens us up to be grateful for it and to be filled with assurance that we can trust in him and that what he has said is true. Because why else would he go through all that? Okay, moving on to the crucifixion. And the first thing we read is that Simon of Cyrene is compelled to carry the cross for Jesus because he's so weak from the beatings, from exhaustion, from blood loss. Because remember, when the Roman soldiers were hitting him with the reed, they're hitting that crown of thorns.
Right. Well,
and it's right there. Like, there's so many vessels.
And the scourging is...
Oh, yes. Scourging on top of he'd already been flogged and...
You know what struck me, though? If it's just total side note, but so fascinating. Like he mentions that Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. And I'm like, well, why does that matter? Well, because Alexander and Rufus were probably still around, and like, go ask them. This is all true. Like this is not made up. This is all true. Here's some witnesses to.
Yeah, like
to
I had
this
read that they
moment.
must have been known by the church at that time.
Yeah,
or
the way
the
it's
people.
Yeah, I just thought that was really amazing. But yeah, sorry, just I
No,
got
no.
excited about.
Yeah, no. And I looked up compelled because some translations say forced, but it's actually a legal practice that soldiers or couriers, official couriers, were legally sanctioned the practice of compelling a civilian to give them immediate aid.
Yeah.
So I don't know that Simon had much choice, but I see him doing this, like carrying Jesus's cross as Jesus is so like, just beat up. And if you read Psalm 22, like that kind of gives like, as a fulfilling of Psalm 22, Jesus's side of what is happening. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, everything that he's feeling. And just how much, I don't know, I feel like that must have changed Simon.
I'm sure.
To walk that, as Dave mentioned in the devotional, the way of suffering.
Which kind of leads to the point of Dan Wilson's sermon about suffering and carrying our cross, right? The taking up of our own crosses.
And it's often thought of as having to do with doing something you don't want to do or doing something that you dread doing. But it's not really about that. It's about putting your old self to death by submitting all of your decisions, all of your desires to the Lord. And it's like a conscious submission. Like you've died to your old self. Like I've been crucified with Christ, like in Galatians 2:20. No longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So you give up. Your decisions are made on what Jesus is calling you to do. And it's a hard thing in the world to do that.
It feels heavy when you start to think about, like, I mean, I thought the story of the woman walking past all of the homeless people to get to church, like,
that was good.
Struck so deep with me because I see homeless people. I have a different reaction, but it's still this, like, it's hard. It's so, you want to just be out there and like help every single one of them.
Yeah.
And then that feels like a heavy burden. So you just, so this is my perspective. So you just don't think about it.
Well, you feel like, where do I start?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's so much suffering and so much loss in their eyes.
Right. But that is like part of taking up our cross, I think, because we're to be loving the people Jesus loves, and we're to love every neighbor, not just the pretty ones.
Exactly. There's no restrictions on loving your neighbor. Yeah.
And so like that idea of but Jesus saying his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And I'm like, no, it's not. It looks so heavy. But then you remember that, or I just studying, remember maybe just now learning or understanding more clearly that burden that we feel is just that burden of taking up our cross and obeying him and being like him is just a part of a huge, bigger picture that he only sees, like he's doing the work and we're just we're his servants, help, like doing our little tiny part of a huge thing that he's already in control of, that he already knows the outcome and he's already got it figured out. And it is light when you begin to understand that. Like suddenly the light burden makes sense.
And by taking up our cross and doing those hard things, one, we have Jesus with us to help us and through his strength. And two, like Dan Wilson mentioned, like that's what makes people remember you. Like I liked his hot tub Christianity, hot tub religion. It's easy, it's comfortable, but it's also easily forgettable, right? Because we remember what Jesus did because that was hard, right? Yeah. Could we have done that? Could we have, kept silent? And he did it all for the joy, the completeness of his joy. Like that's what he came to do. And then I liked how Dan Wilson also talked about the woman you mentioned who walked by the homeless people every week, how she decided, okay, I know, like I need to love my neighbor. So she started out really small.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in a couple weeks, her confidence built up and she did a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden she's needing 45 minutes to walk that one
Right.
block because she knows everybody and she's built relationships with these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And I love that image because that's what God does. Like, we need to take that step,
Yeah.
that scary step, and we start out small. And like Dan said, Jesus doesn't call us to do what we can't do. He
Right.
calls us to do what we can do. It doesn't mean it's easy,
Right.
but we can do it. We're able to do it, or he wouldn't call us
Right.
to do it. And it's just a beautiful image of taking that little step, and then we get filled up more with Jesus and more, and then those steps become bigger and bigger.
Right.
And there's so much assurance in that.
Yeah, definitely.
And this passage about taking up our cross from Mark 8:34, it was convicting to me because, I thought and thought and thought, and it just came to me that, there's something in my life where I have kind of like tried to make exceptions that I know I'm called to do. And I just have been meeting Jesus like halfway. Well, I'll do this much, but because what I've been doing is I've been protecting my heart.
Mhm.
And I've been putting that before doing what Jesus is calling me to do. And like when it dawned on me, when I realized it, I was like, how silly is that? How can I protect my heart more than Jesus can protect it, right? And all these things, well, you can't really want me to do this. Or don't you remember, like, all this bargaining and all these exceptions I'm trying to make? And I was grieved by how long it took me to see this, and that I was putting this before Jesus, like taking this, it made me think of when he asked Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me?
Mhm.
Do you love me? So, but to me, it was like, do you trust me?
Yeah.
And I do. And I didn't realize, but that's what I was doing. I was protecting myself. I'll do this, but only so much,
Mhm.
And how wrong that was. And so taking up my cross, that's brought that to mind. And I'm thankful. It's been brought to mind, but that's going to be a hard thing for me. So moving back on to the crucifixion, verses 21 through 32, I was reading about how they make a point of saying that he's taken out to Golgotha, or Calvary, as we tend to call it, which is outside the city gates.
Mhm.
And it had to be done outside of the city gates by law because capital punishment was not allowed within the city walls, which brought me to Hebrews 13:11 through 12, which mentions how the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the holy places by the high priest,
Mhm.
back in Old Testament times, as a sacrifice for sin, were burned outside the camp. So Jesus suffered outside the gate,
Mhm.
outside the walls, in order to sanctify and cleanse the people through his own blood,
Yeah.
which I was like, oh, that's a beautiful picture, like that's why his blood sanctifies us. And I just thought that was a really cool tie-in.
Yeah.
Verse 24, it's noted that, Mark, he's so like plain and simple with, and they crucified him.
Yeah.
And I was reading about how he just says it like that because the Roman population who he was writing to, that's all they would need to know to have a full understanding of the cruelty and shame of Jesus's death and everything that he, on top of all the mocking and suffering he'd already gone through. Everybody knew just how horrible a death crucifixion was.
Right. Yeah. I think that's kind of important to think about because even growing up in the church, like it's kind of sanitized a little bit, like even like, if you see a crucifix, it's awful, but it's not even half as awful as it really was.
If you look it up, it is horrible.
Yeah. And really that we all deserve, like we tried to be our own gods. We all, who doesn't? That was kind of a discussion earlier today. Like we are all busy trying to be our own gods until we come to Jesus and finally let God be God and let Jesus cleanse us. And,
And your world changes when that happens.
Yeah, you just, the whole perspective. But it had to, the suffering, I know we're going to get more into it next week because the next week is the death of Jesus.
Yes.
But still that ultimate suffering. And I read an article, it was a long time ago, but it was talking about how like lots of people have suffered that much. There's plenty of stories through history of people who have suffered miserably as they died. And what sets Jesus apart is that he's God and he's a part of the Trinity. And in that suffering, there was a moment, the moment when God had to look away from him. And
Oh, I
he was
know.
so utterly alone. And like all of this miserable physical suffering is horrible. And, but to have God look away from you, like that, no,
And I
that's
think
not
that also
tolerable.
had to have hurt God.
Yes. Oh,
right?
yes,
Like,
absolutely.
that's
The fellowship of the Trinity is like
Yes.
perfect, and it was broken for us.
And at
not,
this hardest
not just,
moment, he has to.
Yeah.
But he had to do it for that brings me to the mocking at the end of this passage, especially amongst the religious leaders. Everybody's telling Jesus, "Oh, you saved others," which is just admitting that he did do miracles. Save yourself, come down from that cross. But he couldn't save himself, not if he wanted to save all of us.
Right.
Like this was something that he had to do.
Right, which nobody understood at that very moment.
Yeah,
what he was doing.
But Jesus had made mention of it. So often.
You can't wrap your head around it, can you?
Yeah.
I can't. I mean, it's hard. It's
something else that struck me was in verse 32, when the religious leaders say, "Come down that we may see and believe," which is, we need to see and then we'll believe, which is just a misunderstanding of faith and the opposite of what Jesus says. We believe and then we see. We believe and then we receive, which I thought that was pretty striking.
Yeah, they did see, they saw so much, it wasn't a matter of seeing anyways. Like they saw people risen, Lazarus, the widow's son.
Well, and then back in Mark chapter 8, Jesus says to the Pharisees who are testing him by seeking a sign from heaven, and Jesus says, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Truly, I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." And so, they were told, he wasn't going to give them a sign. They weren't receiving a sign. I think that Jesus' crucifixion, I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks this, but that I want to point out, it's the center of everything.
Yes.
Right? He was condemned so we could be acquitted. It's through his suffering that we have peace and assurance. It's through his shame that we have glory. It's through his sacrifice that we have restoration and reconciliation. It's through his death that we have life. Through his resurrection, we have victory over death. It's always him sacrificing for us to benefit. And I think that's a model he's laid out for us. And it's one that we need to take up our cross and follow.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
We do for the good of others.
Yeah. No, I think, and kind of how I see it really all comes together in my mind, that he suffered all of this because he loved us, like the breaking of the fellowship. It makes me think of Lord of the Rings. Sorry, the breaking, the being on the cross, suffering miserably, and his fellowship with the Father broken for us because he loves us. Because he loves us that much. How much will we endure for people we love? And yet, that's what he calls us to, is to love. And I think how it all comes together is that our taking up our cross is love. And it's love for him first, and then love for neighbors, which is everybody that he brings into our lives in one way or another. Even if it's just the nod and acknowledging somebody exists who would otherwise feel invisible, it's uncomfortable maybe, or taking somebody's hand, if you've, that maybe nobody wants to touch that person because they haven't had a shower in months or whatever, taking their hand and letting them feel the connection of humanity. That love is taking up our cross and giving up our safety and our comfort for the sake of others, because that's what Jesus did for us. So there's strength in that Jesus did this, that he died for us, that is in such a horrible way, and that he was surrounded by people mocking him. Maybe it's, you don't want people to see you reaching out and taking the hand of a homeless person or offering to pray for them, but who cares? So people mock me if I, let them mock, because I'm going to love this person.
And that person's going to remember that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's just, it really comes down to it's my saying lately is the work is love. The work we have to do is love. And it is what Jesus did for us. It was his work for us to save us so we could be with him. And so we should have that. That is what taking up your cross looks like,
My takeaway from taking up your cross from the sermon There were so many, but I really liked the hot tub religion allegory that he brought up, that Dan Wilson brought up, like how easily forgettable that is, but how easy we can get kind of lulled into that trap, like to not go out into the world and to do the hard things and to not put ourselves first, right? Because I don't want to be made a fool of, or I don't want to look dumb, or whatever it is that we say to ourselves to stop us from doing it. Like, we are created in the image of God, right? We are to reflect his image. Yes. And so that's my takeaway. Like, are the things I'm doing, are the decisions I'm making, the actions I take, am I reflecting Jesus? And am I sinning by omission by not doing things that I know Jesus wants me to do? Right. And that I agree with you. We are to love one another, that there's no restrictions. It's not just love other Christians. It's not just love nice people. It's like we're to love each other.
Right.
Everyone. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.